Scott Foster versus Chris Paul. This continues to be a dilemma for the NBA because the NBA considers Scott Foster one of its top officials. Scott Foster routinely referees finals games. The NBA thinks Scott Foster is great. Chris Paul thinks Scott Foster sucks. How does this get resolved, and how big an issue is this for the NBA?
Anytime Chris Paul plays in a Scott Foster game now, the integrity of the game is going to be called into it. And I think it's as simple as that. And again, I am sympathetic to the idea that it's a slippery slope, but I don't think you can have Scott Foster on a Chris Paul game again.
Yeah, but Rowan, you just yada like the most important part to all this. Like the idea that a player can get a certain referee off of games is a very slippery slope. Because what happens if LeBron James says, I don't want my games refereed by Ed Malloy anymore? What happens if Nikola Jokic says Bill Kennedy is out to get me? Like, where does it end? Why I think Scott Foster is on high ground here is because if and when Chris Paul had this meeting with a league official back in, I think he said 2019, there was no discipline for Scott Foster. In this particular situation, Scott Foster had the incident with Chris Paul, and he was back on Friday. I was in LA at the Clippers game. He worked that game on Friday night. There was no discipline for this. In the NBA's mind, there really is no beef. The NBA doesn't see Scott Foster doing anything wrong.
But the NBA can't pretend like there's no beef. There's data backing up the beef. This is also the umpteenth time.
There's anecdotal data of Chris Paul being pissed off at calls. Like, I guarantee you, Rowan, if you really dug into this, like if somebody out there, and please, people on social media, feel free to waste your time doing this. But I guarantee, like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably hasn't won X number of games with X referee there. I guarantee if you dig into this long enough, you're going to find more examples like the one we have of Chris Paul.